The November rain hammered against the iron gates of Nightshade Hall like 1,000 desperate fists. Rowena Ashford stood in the downpour, her threadbare coat doing nothing against the Montana cold. Water streamed down her face, mixing with something that might have been tears or might have been simple exhaustion. Her chestnut hair hung in wet ropes around her pale face, and her green eyes held the kind of weariness that came from 3 days without proper sleep. Behind her, 8 miles of mountain road stretched back toward the town of Silverpine. She had walked every step in the freezing rain because there was no money for a horse, no money for a wagon, no money for anything except the 47 cents that clinked uselessly in her coat pocket. The manor loomed above her like something carved from nightmares. Gray stone walls rose 4 stories high, their surface dark with age and moisture. Towers jutted toward the storm-black sky at odd angles, as if the building had grown organically rather than been constructed. Every window glowed with warm yellow light, but somehow that illumination made the shadows deeper, more menacing. The architecture was Gothic ancient wrong in ways Rowena could not articulate. It looked like the kind of place where hope went to die. She raised her fist to knock on the servant's entrance, then hesitated. 28 years old, and this was where life had brought her. This was her last chance, her final option. If the master of Nightshade Hall turned her away, she and Briar would freeze to death within the week. The Montana winter had come early this year, brutal and unforgiving. The Yellowstone River had frozen over in October. The laundry where she had been washing clothes had closed. There was no work, no shelter, no future. The door swung open before her knuckles touched wood. An old woman stood in the doorway, brittle as dried bone. She had silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and steel-gray eyes that assessed Rowena the way a butcher might assess a side of beef past its prime. She wore a black dress that might have been fashionable 50 years ago, and her posture was military straight, despite what must have been 70 years of life. "We have no positions available." The woman's voice was cold, dismissive, final. "Please." Rowena's voice cracked, but she forced herself to continue. "I can cook, clean men clothes. I can work any position you have. My daughter is only 6 years old, and we have not eaten in 2 days. I am not interested in sob stories." The woman moved to close the door. Rowena's hand shot out, stopping it. Her palms slapped against the aged wood with a sound like a gunshot. The old woman's eyes widened, slightly surprised, breaking through the mask of indifference. "I will do anything," Rowena said, and she heard the steel in her own voice. "Not begging, negotiating. Any work you have, just please give me a chance." The steel-eyed woman studied her. Then her gaze shifted past Rowena to something in the shadows beyond the gate. Her expression changed, subtle but unmistakable. Recognition, perhaps even fear. One moment, the door closed. Rowena stood shivering, hope and dread warring in her chest. The rain continued its relentless assault. Her fingers had gone numb inside her wet gloves. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, and the sound seemed to echo off the mountains surrounding Nightshade Hall. She thought about Briar waiting in their rented room above the butcher's shop in Silverpine. 6 years old, with brown hair and brown eyes and a smile that could break your heart. Briar had not complained about the hunger, had not cried when Rowena sold her favorite doll to buy bread. She had simply asked, with the terrible wisdom of children who grow up too fast, "Mama, will we be warm again?" Rowena had promised they would. Now she had to make that promise real, no matter the cost. The door opened again. This time a man stood there. Rowena's breath caught. He was impossibly tall, well over 6 feet, with a frame that suggested strength without bulk. Black hair swept back from a face that looked carved from marble by a sculptor who understood beauty but not warmth. His eyes were the most startling shade of metallic silver she had ever seen, reflecting the lightning that cracked across the sky behind her. They seemed to catch and hold the light like mirrors, like an animal's eyes in the dark. He wore a dark suit that probably cost more than her entire village made in a year. The fabric was perfect, unmarred by rain, despite the storm. When he moved down the steps toward her, it was with the fluid grace of a predator. His footsteps made no sound. "You are the woman seeking work." His voice was deep, cultured, with an accent she could not place. Something old, British perhaps, or French, or something that predated both. "Yes, sir." Rowena forced herself to meet those silver eyes. "My name is Rowena Ashford. I am a widow with a young daughter. I can work any position you have available." The man descended the final steps. Up close, she could see that his skin was pale, almost luminous in the darkness. He circled her slowly like a buyer at a horse auction. She held herself still, refusing to cower. "Your husband," he said. "How long has he been dead?" 3 months. There was an accident at the Thornfield lumber mill. She lifted her chin. I sold everything we owned, then worked where I could. But winter came early. The river froze. The laundry closed. She met his silver eyes steadily. I have knocked on every door in the county. Yours is the last. And if you turn me away, then my daughter and I will likely freeze to death in whatever shelter we can find. Her voice did not waver. But at least I will know I tried everything. Silence stretched between them. The man studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. There was something not quite human about him, something that set off every survival instinct she possessed. The way he moved without sound, the way his eyes reflected light like mirrors, the way the cold seemed to radiate from him rather than toward him. What is your daughter's name? He asked quietly. Briar. She is 6 years old. Bright, curious kind. Rowena's hands clenched into fists. She deserves better than a mother who cannot even provide a proper meal. Something almost like understanding crossed his features. I am Dorian Gravesend. I own this manor and the surrounding lands. His silver eyes held hers. I have one position available, though I suspect you will refuse it once you hear the terms. I will not refuse. Rowena's voice was firm. Whatever it is, I will do it. He moved closer. She caught a scent like winter air and old books, something cold and ancient that made her think of crypts and centuries. His presence was overwhelming, not through aggression, but through sheer otherness. The only position I have available, he said, his voice dropping lower, is not for a maid or a cook or a laundress. He paused, and in that pause, Rowena felt the weight of inevitability. The only job here is wife, in my bed. The words hit her like a physical blow. Rowena staggered back a step, her mind reeling. She had expected many things, degrading things, desperate things, but not this. I do not understand, she managed. It is quite simple. Dorian's tone was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather. I require a wife. You require security and resources. We can come to an arrangement that benefits both parties. That is insane. The words burst out before she could stop them. You do not even know me. One eyebrow arched. Marriages of convenience have existed for centuries, Mrs. Ashford. This would be no different, except we would both go into it with clear eyes and honest terms. Rowena's heart hammered against her ribs. This was madness, complete madness. But another voice whispered in the back of her mind, cold and calculating. It whispered about Briar shivering in their rented room, about the 47 cents that would not buy another day's food, about the very real possibility that they might not survive another week. What exactly are you proposing? She heard herself ask. You would become my wife in all legal respects. Dorian clasped his hands behind his back. You and your daughter would live here at Nightshade Hall. You would have food, shelter, clothing, warmth. Your daughter would receive an education. You would want for nothing. He let the implication hang in the air. And in exchange, you would fulfill the duties of a wife. You would share my bed. You would be bound to me. You would not leave without my permission. So I would be trading one prison for another, Rowena said quietly. Then refuse. Dorian stepped back, and his voice turned sharp. Walk away, take your pride, and see how long it keeps you warm when the real winter storms hit. His silver eyes glittered in the darkness. I am offering you survival, Mrs. Ashford. I am not a kind man, but I am a practical one. You would be cared for, protected. Your daughter would never go hungry again. He paused. What kind of mother would that make you to refuse such an offer for the sake of pride? What kind of mother would I be, Rowena countered, to sell myself like this? The kind who loves her child more than her pride. Dorian's response was immediate. The kind who understands that survival sometimes requires sacrifice. I will not pretend this is romance. I will not lie and say I love you. But I will promise you this. He took a step closer. You would be treated with respect. Your daughter would be cherished. And you would never again have to stand in the rain begging for work. Thunder crashed overhead. Rowena thought of Briar waiting in their cold room with an empty stomach and trusting eyes. She thought of the 47 cents in her pocket. She thought of the 37 people who had already said no. She thought of the winter that would kill them both if she walked away. I need time to think, she said. 24 hours. Dorian's voice was firm. Tomorrow at sunset, return with your answer. If you agree, bring your daughter and whatever possessions you have. If you refuse, do not come back. He turned to go, then paused. One more thing. If you accept, you should know what you are agreeing to. I am not like other men, Mrs. Ashford. This house is not like other houses. His silver eyes seemed to glow in the darkness. I sleep during the day. I am awake only at night. The servants here are all bound by contracts they cannot break. He paused again, and when he spoke, his voice was very quiet. And the last woman who tried to leave Nightshade Hall without my permission was found 3 days later, frozen in the woods. Her face was locked in a scream. Rowena's blood turned to ice. Was that a threat? It was a fact. Dorian's expression was grave. The manor protects what belongs to it. If you become mine, the manor will protect you as well. But it will also ensure you stay. He moved toward the door. Think on that when you make your decision. The door closed with finality, leaving Rowena alone in the rain. She stood there for a long moment, her mind churning with impossible choices. What was Dorian Gravesend? Those eyes, that grace, the way he moved without sound, the sleeping during the day and waking only at night. None of it made sense. All of it terrified her. But Briar's face swam before her eyes, and Rowena knew what her answer would be. Tomorrow at sunset, she would return to Nightshade Hall. Tomorrow at sunset, she would agree to become wife to a man who was clearly more than human. Because in the end, that was what mothers did. They survived, no matter the cost. The walk back to Silverpine took 3 hours through the freezing rain. By the time Rowena reached the butcher's shop, her clothes were soaked through and her teeth chattered uncontrollably. She climbed the narrow stairs to their rented room, each step an effort. The door opened to reveal a space barely large enough for a bed and a rickety chair. The single window was cracked, letting in cold air that made the candle flame dance. Briar sat on the bed wrapped in their one thin blanket, reading by candlelight. At 6 years old, she had taught herself to read from the few books Rowena had managed to keep. Mama. Briar's face lit up, and Rowena's heart broke all over again at how thin her daughter had become. The roundness had left her cheeks. Her collarbones showed sharp beneath her nightgown. Rowena pulled her daughter close, feeling the small body shiver. Did you find work? Briar asked, her voice hopeful. Perhaps. Rowena chose her words carefully. She would not lie to her daughter, but she would not burden her with the full weight of this decision either. I met a lord who owns a great manor. He has offered us a position there. Briar pulled back to look at her mother's face. What kind of position? He wants me to marry him. Silence. Briar's brown eyes went wide. Marry him? But you were married to Papa. I know, sweetheart. Rowena brushed wet hair back from her face. But Papa is gone, and we need help. This lord can give us food and warmth and safety. Do you love him? The question was so direct, so innocent, that it cut like a knife. No, Rowena refused to lie. I do not know him, but sometimes people make practical choices to survive. Briar was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the terrible maturity of a child who had grown up too fast. Would he be nice to us? I believe so. Would we have our own room? Yes. Would we have food every day? Yes. Briar nodded slowly. Then we should do it, Mama. I am so hungry. If this lord can help us, then we should say yes. When had her child become so wise? Rowena pulled Briar close again, breathing in the scent of her hair. You are too smart for your own good. So we are going. Briar's voice was small but steady. Yes, tomorrow at sunset we will go to Nightshade Hall. Rowena looked at her daughter seriously. But Briar Lord Gravesend is different. Strange. He only comes out at night. There will be rules we have to follow. Is he a monster? The question was curious rather than frightened. Rowena considered how to answer. I do not know what he is, she said finally, but he offered us safety, and I am choosing to trust that offer. Briar nodded solemnly. Then we will be brave together. Yes, Rowena kissed her forehead. Brave together. That night, Rowena lay awake while Briar slept curled against her side. Her mind conjured possibilities, each more frightening than the last. The word formed in her thoughts like ice crystallizing vampire. Was that what Dorian Gravesend was? It would explain the silver eyes, the pale skin, the way he moved without sound, the sleeping during the day. But vampires were just stories, legends, things to frighten children. Except Rowena had seen his eyes reflect light like an animal's, had felt the cold that radiated from him, had sensed the predator beneath the gentleman's clothing. If Dorian Gravesend was a monster, she was about to walk her daughter directly into his hands. But what choice did she have? Better to risk the monster you could see than die slowly in the dark. The next day passed in a blur. They packed their few possessions into a single canvas bag. Rowena dressed Briar in her best dress, the blue one with white buttons that was getting too small. She tried to make herself presentable, combing out her chestnut hair and pinning it back, washing her face in the basin of cold water. As sunset approached, Briar asked, "Are you scared, Mama?" "Terrified," Rowena answered honestly, but I am also hopeful. Hope can be scary too, Briar said with that wisdom beyond her years. Sometimes it leads to good things, and sometimes it leads to disappointment. But we will not know which until we try, Rowena replied. Right, right. Briar took her mother's hand. Whatever happens, we face it together. The manor looked different at dusk. As Rowena and Briar walked through the gates, the stone walls seemed to absorb the fading light, making the building appear darker, more imposing. Windows glowed with warm yellow light, but somehow that illumination made the shadows deeper, more menacing. The gates stood open as if expecting them. Their footsteps echoed in the courtyard. The rain had stopped, but the air still held that cold dampness that seeped into bones. Rowena felt eyes watching them from the windows, though she could see no one. The front door opened before they reached it. The steel-eyed woman from yesterday stood there, her expression as cold as before. So you came. Her gaze swept over them dismissively. Lord Gravesend is in his study. Follow me. They entered a hallway that seemed to stretch forever. Dark wood paneling lined the walls. Portraits of severe-looking people hung at intervals, and Rowena noticed they all seemed to have the same silver eyes. Chandeliers cast just enough light to make the shadows deeper. The air smelled of old books and something else, something cold and ancient that she could not name. The woman who still had not given her name led them up a grand staircase. The steps were worn smooth by centuries of feet. At the top, another corridor stretched into darkness. Their guide's footsteps made crisp sounds on the hardwood floor, but Rowena noticed uneasily that their own steps seemed muffled, as if the house itself were swallowing the sound. They stopped before a heavy oak door. The woman knocked once, then entered without waiting for a response. Wait here, she said and disappeared inside. Rowena pressed Briar close to her side. The child looked around with wide eyes, taking in the grandeur and the strangeness with equal measure. Mama, Briar whispered, this place feels wrong. I know. Rowena kept her voice low. But remember, we are together. Whatever happens, together. Together, Briar repeated, though her voice shook slightly. The door opened again. The woman gestured them inside. Dorian Gravesend sat behind a massive desk covered in papers and leather-bound books. He wore another impeccable suit, this one deep charcoal, that made his pale skin seem even more luminous. Those silver eyes found Rowena immediately, and she felt pinned by his gaze like a butterfly on a collector's board. Mrs. Ashford, he stood with that same fluid grace. I was not certain you would return. I gave my word I would consider your offer. Rowena's voice was steadier than she felt. I have considered it. And what have you decided? Before I answer, I have questions. Fair, Dorian gestured to two chairs across from his desk. Please sit, both of you. Briar climbed into one of the chairs, her feet not quite touching the floor. Rowena sat beside her, keeping one hand on her daughter's shoulder. You said this house has rules, Rowena began. What are they? They and several. Dorian leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. First, you will not enter my private chambers during the day. Ever, under any circumstances. Why, Buema? That is not your concern. Simply know that violation of this rule has consequences you would not enjoy. His voice held no room for argument. Second, you will not leave the grounds without my permission. The manor protects its own, but it cannot protect you if you wander beyond its walls. He continued, Third, you will not speak of what you see or hear in this house to anyone outside of it. The staff, the arrangements, anything unusual, all of it remains private. And fourth, Rowena's voice was tight, you will be my wife in truth. That means sharing my bed when I require it. Presenting yourself as my spouse in public, and binding yourself to me in ways you may not fully understand until they are tested. He paused. These are not negotiable. If you agree to all of them. What if I violate these rules? Then the contract breaks. Dorian's expression was grave, and breaking the contract has consequences. The last woman who tried to leave, she broke her contract. The manor responded accordingly. You make it sound like the house is alive. Perhaps it is in ways. His silver eyes flickered with something that might have been amusement or warning. Nightshade Hall has stood for over 500 years. It has seen empires rise and fall. It remembers everything and everyone who has lived within its walls. He leaned forward slightly. And it protects what belongs to it with a jealousy that borders on malevolence. Rowena felt ice in her veins. You are asking me to trap myself and my daughter in a house that might kill us if we displease it. I am asking you to accept protection that comes with rules. Dorian's voice softened slightly. Rowena, I will not lie to you. This life is not normal, but it is safe. Provided you follow the agreements we make, your daughter will never starve. You will never sleep in the cold again. His silver eyes held hers. Is that not worth some restrictions? Briar tugged on Rowena's sleeve. Mama, can I ask something? Of course, sweetheart. Briar turned to Dorian, her brown eyes curious rather than frightened. Are you going to hurt my mama? The bluntness of the question made Rowena's breath catch. Dorian studied the child for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle, the first time Rowena had heard such a tone from him. No, he said, I will not hurt your mother. I will keep her safe. And I will keep you safe as well, he paused. Even from myself, if necessary. What does that mean? Rowena demanded. It means that if you try to break the rules, I will stop you before the manor has to. Dorian stood and moved around the desk. He knelt before Briar's chair, bringing himself to her eye level. Young Briar, he said quietly, do you like stories? Briar's face brightened. I love stories. Good, then let me tell you one. Dorian settled into a more comfortable position. A long time ago, there was a man who lived in a great house. He was very lonely because he was different from other people. But the house loved him anyway, and it tried to take care of him by keeping away anyone who might hurt him. His voice took on the cadence of a fairy tale. Sometimes the house was too protective. It hurt people it thought were dangerous even when they were just lost or scared. The man learned that the only way to keep people safe in his house was to have very clear rules. As long as people followed the rules, the house knew they were friends. But if people broke the rules, the house thought they were enemies. He looked at Briar seriously. Do you understand? Briar nodded slowly. I think so. The house is like a big twig that bites people it thinks are bad. Very similar, Dorian said, and for just a moment he smiled. The expression transformed his face, making him look almost human. So if you and your mother live here, you must both promise to follow the rules. That way the house knows you are friends. What are the rules for me? Briar asked. Do not go into locked rooms. Do not leave the grounds without permission. Always be in your bed by midnight. His expression became serious. And never ever go to the North Tower. That last one is very important, Briar. The North Tower is not safe for children. Why not? Because something lives there that does not like visitors. And if you disturb it, even I might not be able to protect you. Briar processed this with the remarkable adaptability of children. Okay, I promise. She looked at her mother. We should say yes, Mama. I like Lord Gravesend. He tells good stories. Rowena looked between her daughter's trusting face and Dorian's unreadable expression. She thought about the alternatives, the cold room, the empty stomachs, the very real possibility of death before winter's end. Yes, the word came out before she could stop it. We accept your terms, all of them. Dorian straightened and something flickered in his silver eyes that might have been relief. Then we have an agreement. He moved to a cabinet and pulled out a document. The paper was thick, expensive, covered in dense text. He set it on the desk with a sound like a judge's gavel. This is a marriage contract. It outlines everything we have discussed, plus legal considerations regarding property inheritance and rights. He placed a fountain pen beside it. You should read it carefully before you sign. Rowena scanned the pages. The language was formal, legal, difficult to parse, but certain phrases jumped out at her like accusations in perpetuity. Bound to the estate. Rights forfeit upon violation. When this reads less like a marriage contract and more like a prison sentence, she said quietly. It is both. Dorian's honesty was brutal. I will not pretend otherwise, but it is also a guarantee of safety and care. No matter what happens, as long as you uphold your end, you and Briar will be provided for. Always. Rowena thought of her wedding to Thaddeus, the small ceremony in the church at Silverpine, the simple vows, the joy in his eyes as he slipped a ring on her finger. That had been love. This was survival. She signed her name, Dorian countersigned beneath her signature. The moment his pen left the paper, Rowena felt something shift in the air, a tingling along her skin, a pressure at the base of her skull. The candles in the room flickered despite there being no breeze. The temperature dropped several degrees. And for just a moment, she could have sworn she heard the house itself take a breath, a long, satisfied exhalation that seemed to come from the walls themselves. It is done, Dorian said. He rolled the contract and placed it in a drawer, which he locked with a key he kept on a chain around his neck. You are now Lady Gravesend. This is your home. He paused. Your prison. Call it what you wish, Rowena said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. The reality remains the same. We are bound here now, both of us. Yes, Dorian's silver eyes held hers. You are. He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. Mrs. Greaves will show you and Briar to your rooms. Your daughter will have the blue suite in the east wing. You will have chambers adjacent to mine." His voice dropped lower. "Tonight, after Briar is settled and asleep, you will come to my chambers. We will consummate the marriage and seal the bond properly." Was terror and resignation warred in Rowena's chest. "Of course. Sooner rather than later, so I cannot change my mind." "Would you?" Dorian asked quietly. "Even if you could." The admission tasted like ash. "I would walk through fire for my daughter's life." "Then you will survive this as well." He opened the door. Mrs. Greaves, the steel-eyed woman, appeared as if she had been waiting just outside. "Yes, my lord. Show Lady Gravesend and her daughter to their rooms. Make sure the child has dinner and is settled for the night." He glanced at Rowena. "Then prepare the ladies' chambers adjacent to mine." Mrs. Greaves's expression flickered with something that might have been surprise, but she curtsied. "Yes, my lord." As they followed Mrs. Greaves out, Rowena looked back at Dorian one last time. He stood by the window, silhouetted against the darkening sky. He looked more like a statue than a man, more like a monument to loneliness than anything living. "What have I done?" the thought whispered through her mind like wind through a graveyard. "What have I traded my freedom for?" But then Briar's hand slipped into hers, warm and trusting, and Rowena pushed the doubts away. For her daughter, she could endure anything, even becoming wife to a monster, even letting him into her bed, even binding herself to a house that killed people who tried to leave. She had to. Their rooms were beyond anything Rowena could have imagined. Briar's chamber was a child's paradise. The bed was enormous, draped with soft blankets and shades of cream and rose. Bookshelves lined one wall filled with leather-bound volumes that looked centuries old alongside newer children's stories. A chest stood open near the window, revealing beautiful dresses in fabrics Rowena had only seen in shop windows. Toys were scattered across a plush rug, wooden horses, porcelain dolls, a miniature tea set. And the window seat overlooked gardens that seemed to glow in the moonlight, flowers blooming impossibly in November. "Is this all for me?" Briar's eyes were wide as saucers. "Yes." Mrs. Greaves's voice was slightly less cold when addressing the child. "Lord Gravesend had this prepared when he learned of your age. He wanted you to have everything you might need." Rowena felt something twist in her chest. Dorian had prepared this room before she had even agreed. He had been so certain she would say yes. Or perhaps he simply understood desperation well enough to know she had no other choice. Her own chambers connected to Briar's through a small door. The room was elegant but sparse compared to her daughter's wonderland. A four-poster bed dominated the space, its dark curtains drawn back to reveal burgundy linens. A wardrobe stood against one wall. A vanity with a silver-backed mirror occupied another corner. And on the opposite side of the room, a door that she assumed led to Dorian's private chambers. That door was currently closed and locked. "Dinner will be brought shortly," Mrs. Greaves said, moving toward the exit. Then she paused, her steel-gray eyes finding in Rowena's. "Lady Gravesend, a word of advice." Rowena waited. "Follow the rules, all of them. Lord Gravesend is fair but absolute. The manor responds to his will, and his will is law here." "What exactly is this place?" Rowena asked quietly, not wanting Briar to hear from the other room. Mrs. Greaves was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice held something that might have been pity. "A sanctuary, a prison, a purgatory. Take your pick." She gestured vaguely at the walls. "I have been here for 37 years. I followed the rules and I am still alive. That is more than I can say for those who did not." With that cheerful statement, she left. Rowena sank onto the edge of the bed, her hands shaking. From Briar's room, she heard her daughter's excited voice as she discovered each new treasure. At least one of them was happy. A knock at the connecting door made her jump. "Come in," she called. Dorian entered without waiting for further invitation. He had changed into more casual clothing, though casual for him still meant elegance. A dark shirt open at the collar, fitted trousers. Those same silver eyes that seemed to see through her. "I wanted to check that everything was satisfactory," he said. "It is more than satisfactory. It is overwhelming." Rowena stood feeling at a disadvantage, sitting while he loomed over her. "You have been generous with Briar. She is a child. Children should be happy." His expression softened slightly. "I may not be human, but I am not needlessly cruel." "So you admit to being inhuman?" "What else would I be?" Dorian moved to the window, looking out at the moonlit grounds. "A man who sleeps during the day and wakes at night, who does not age, who has lived in this house for longer than any mortal should." He turned back to her. "A man who can command shadows and read the uncertainty in your eyes like words on a page. I am exactly what you suspect me to be, Rowena. And you still married me knowing this, still brought your daughter into my home. Always for Briar. Then you are braver than most, Dorian said quietly, or more desperate. That too, she crossed her arms. When does this happen? The consummation. Are you frightened? Why lie? Rowena met his gaze. But I agreed to this. I will not fight you. I do not want your reluctant compliance. Dorian's voice held an edge. When I take you to my bed, I want your presence, your attention, not your cowering. Then what do you want? The question burst out. Why marriage at all? You are clearly powerful enough to take whatever you want. Why bother with contracts and ceremonies? Because power without consent is tyranny. He moved closer. And I have had enough of that to last 1,000 lifetimes. I want a wife, not a victim. I want someone who chooses to be here, even if that choice comes from desperate circumstances. You cannot have both. Rowena's voice was tight. You cannot demand my presence and my choice when you have trapped me here. Can I not? His hand came up to brush a strand of hair from her face. The touch was cold, gentle, disturbing. You made a choice tonight, Rowena. You signed the contract. You agreed to be my wife. Now I am asking if you will honor that agreement with your whole self or just pieces. That is not fair. Life is not fair. His silver eyes held hers. But I am offering you a chance at something more than simple survival. I am offering you power within these walls. The title of Lady Gravesend carries weight. The servants will answer to you. The household will run as you see fit. You will have authority, autonomy, everything except the ability to leave. Blessing. He paused. Is that truly so terrible? Yes, the word was barely a whisper. Because you are asking me to be grateful for a cage. I am asking you to make the best of a situation neither of us chose. Dorian stepped back. I did not choose loneliness, Rowena. I did not choose this existence. But I survive it by creating order, by finding small happinesses where I can. Perhaps we can do the same together. How long? The question surprised them both. How long what? How long have you been alone? Something shifted in his expression. Vulnerability raw and unexpected. A very long time. Too long. His voice held depths of grief she had not anticipated. I have had companions over the years. Some stayed longer than others. But humans age and die and I remain. It becomes exhausting watching everything you care about turn to dust. So you found someone desperate enough to be trapped with you forever, Rowena said, and despite the harshness of the words, she felt a flicker of understanding. That is cruel but accurate. Dorian moved toward the door. I will return in the 2 hours. That should give you time to settle Briar, to prepare yourself, and to decide if you can accept this arrangement with grace or if you will merely endure it. What difference does it make? Every difference. He paused at the threshold. I do not want a martyr in my bed, Rowena. I want a partner, even one bound by contract rather than love. He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Rowena stared at the space where he had been. A partner, as if they were equals in this, as if she had any power at all. But perhaps that was the key. Perhaps the only way to survive this was to find what power she did have and wield it carefully. Mama, come see. Briar's voice pulled her from her thoughts. Rowena entered her daughter's room to find a cart laden with food. Roasted chicken still steaming, fresh bread with butter, vegetables that smelled of herbs, and a dessert that made Briar's eyes light up like stars. They ate together on the floor like a picnic. Briar chattered about every wonderful thing in her new room, while Rowena tried to memorize this moment, her daughter's joy, the warmth, the safety. This was why she had signed the contract. This was worth the price. After dinner, she helped Briar into a nightgown she found in the wardrobe, soft as silk and perfectly sized. She tucked her daughter into the enormous bed and sat beside her, stroking her hair. Are you happy here? Rowena asked. Briar nodded sleepily. This is like a fairy tale. Lord Gravesend is like a prince in a castle. He is not a prince, sweetheart. He is something else. But he is keeping us safe, right? Yes, he is keeping us safe. Do you like him, Mama? I do not know yet. Rowena was honest, but I am trying. That is all we can do, Briar said, her eyes already closing. Try and see what happens. She fell asleep mid-sentence, exhausted by the day's emotions. Rowena sat with her a while longer, watching her peaceful face, gathering her courage for what came next. 2 hours. Dorian had said 2 hours. That time was almost up. Rowena returned to her own chambers. She changed into a nightgown laid out on the bed, simple white cotton that covered her from neck to floor, but somehow felt more exposing than nakedness. She brushed out her chestnut hair, until it fell in waves down her back. She stared at herself in the vanity mirror. The woman looking back at her was a stranger, a woman who had sold herself to a monster, a woman about to climb into a vampire's bed, a woman who would do anything, sacrifice anything for her child. 3 knocks at the connecting door, measured, precise. "It is open," Rowena said. Her voice did not shake. Dorian entered and locked the door behind him. In the candlelight, his pale skin seemed to glow from within. Those silver eyes found hers in the mirror, and she saw hunger there. Not just physical hunger, but something deeper. Loneliness, longing, need. "You came." He sounded almost surprised. She stood turning to face him. "I keep my word. Words can be broken. So can people." Rowena held her ground. "But I am still here. That counts for something." Dorian crossed the room, slowly giving her time to flee if she chose. But Rowena did not move. If this was the price of Briar's safety, she would pay it. "Tell me something," he said, stopping just in front of her. "Are you afraid of me or of what I am?" "Both, neither. I do not know." Rowena met his eyes. "I am afraid of what you could do to me, what you could take from me. But I am also afraid of how much I need what you are offering." "That is honest." His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. "I can work with honest." He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When his lips met hers, they were cool and firm and gentler than she expected. Rowena's hands came up instinctively to his chest. Whether to push away or pull closer, she could not say. The kiss deepened. Dorian's arms slid around her waist, drawing her against him. She could feel the coldness of his body through the thin nightgown, could sense the inhuman strength in his careful embrace. And beneath her uncertainty, beneath her resignation, something stirred. Curiosity, interest, the faint possibility that this might not be the horror she had imagined. He pulled back, studying her face. "You are trembling." "Anticipation or apprehension?" Rowena whispered. "I cannot tell anymore." "Good." Dorian lifted her chin. "Uncertainty can be transformed into other things with the right attention. Let me show you." He kissed her again, and this time Rowena allowed herself to respond. This was her life now, her choice, her cage. She might as well find what beauty she could within its bars. The night stretched ahead, full of strange surrender. And as Dorian guided her toward the bed, as his hands began to explore as she gave herself over to this bizarre marriage, Rowena thought of Briar sleeping peacefully next door. For that peace, for that safety, for that chance at something better, she could endure this. She could become whatever Dorian Gravesend needed her to be. She could learn to live in this house that remembered everything. She could survive. What she did not expect as his touch gentled her apprehension and his whispered words promised things she did not dare believe, was that surviving might transform into something else, something that felt almost like living. The morning came too soon and not soon enough. Rowena woke alone in the massive bedsheets tangled around her body. Dorian was gone as if he had never been there, except she could still feel the coolness of his touch on her skin, could still taste him on her lips, could still hear his voice in the dark saying things that made her ache in ways she had not expected. She sat up slowly, her body protesting. The night had been overwhelming, terrifying and gentle and strange all at once. Dorian had been careful with her, perhaps sensing how close she was to breaking. He had coaxed responses from her body even as her mind reeled. And when it was over, he had held her until she fell asleep, his cold arms somehow comforting in the darkness. Now morning light streamed through the windows and Rowena was alone. A note lay on the pillow beside her. The handwriting was elegant masculine. "I sleep in my chambers during the day. Do not attempt to enter. The door is locked and will remain so. You are free to explore the manor, but remember the rules. The North Tower is forbidden. The gardens are safe. The library is on the 2nd floor if you wish to read. Mrs. Greaves will assist you with anything you need. Tonight I will find you after Briar is asleep. We will talk. There is much you need to understand about your new life. D." He had signed it simply D, as if they were intimate now, as if one night in his bed created familiarity. Perhaps it did in whatever twisted way their relationship functioned. Rowena rose and dressed in clothes she found in the wardrobe. Simple dresses, elegant, but practical, all perfectly sized. Everything in this house seemed to anticipate needs before they were spoken. It should have been comforting. Instead, it felt invasive, as if the manor itself was watching, learning, preparing. Briar was already awake when Rowena checked on her, sitting in the window seat with a book open in her lap. "Morning, Mama." She looked up with a smile. "Did you sleep well?" "Well enough." Rowena sat beside her. "And you?" This is the most comfortable bed I have ever slept in. Briar's joy was infectious. And look, someone brought breakfast. A tray sat on a small table laden with eggs and toast and jam. Rowena's stomach growled despite the strangeness of everything. When did this arrive? She asked. I do not know. It was just here when I woke up. Briar tilted her head thoughtfully. Magic, maybe? Rowena thought of Dorian's words. The house protects what belongs to it. Perhaps magic was as good an explanation as any for a building that seemed to live and breathe and anticipate. They ate together, Briar chattering about the books she wanted to read, and whether there were horses she could visit, and if the gardens had flowers even in winter. Rowena listened and nodded, and tried to ignore the sense that invisible eyes watched their every move. After breakfast, Mrs. Greaves appeared without knocking, entering Briar's room as if she had every right. She probably did in whatever hierarchy governed this strange house. Lady Gravesend, she nodded to Rowena. Lord Gravesend has instructed me to give you a tour of the manor and explain the household operations. Your daughter may accompany us or remain here with one of the maids. I want to come. Briar hopped down from her seat. I want to see everything. Then see everything you shall. Mrs. Greaves's expression softened slightly when looking at the child. But remember, there are places we do not go. The North Tower, Briar recited seriously. I know, and locked doors are locked for a reason. Correct. The tour began. Nightshade Hall was enormous, far larger than it appeared from outside. Endless corridors branched into more corridors. Rooms opened into suites that opened into wings. Rowena lost count of the bedchambers, sitting rooms, parlors, and spaces whose purpose she could not even guess. The library was spectacular. 3 stories of books with rolling ladders and comfortable chairs and windows that somehow never let in too much sun. Briar gasped when she saw it, immediately running to the nearest shelf. The kitchen was vast, run by a cook named Mrs. Davies, who seemed less intimidating than Mrs. Greaves, but no more willing to answer questions about the nature of the house. The dining room could seat 30. The ballroom could hold 100. It was a house built for entertaining on a grand scale, though Rowena saw no evidence that anyone ever visited. Who else lives here? She finally asked as they climbed yet another staircase. Just the staff, Mrs. Greaves replied. Myself, Mrs. Davies, 3 maids, 2 groundskeepers, and a stable master. We all have quarters in the East Wing. How many years have you been here? 37, as I told you yesterday. And in that time, has anyone else lived here besides Lord Gravesend? Mrs. Greaves's voice became carefully neutral. There have been others, ladies who stayed for a time. Where are they now? Gone. That is all you need to know. They walked through a portrait gallery where severe faces stared down from gilded frames. Many had those same silver eyes, Dorian's family. He is the last of his line, Mrs. Greaves said when she noticed Rowena studying the paintings. The Gravesend family has owned this land for over 500 years. His parents died long ago and he never had siblings. Now he is alone. Is that why he wanted a wife? Rowena asked. Loneliness. Perhaps. Or perhaps he simply wanted someone to share the burden of immortality. Mrs. Greaves stopped before a locked door at the end of a long corridor. This is Lord Gravesend's wing. You may enter your adjacent chambers, but this door, she indicated the heavy oak barrier, remains locked during the day. At night he will come to you. He will not summon you here. What is beyond that door? His private rooms, his sanctuary, his coffin if you prefer the dramatic term. Mrs. Greaves' expression was grave. He sleeps deeply during the day, vulnerable in ways he is not at night. That door protects him. And if someone were to break through it, the manor would respond. She paused. As I said, the house protects its own. We do not test that protection. The tour continued, but Rowena's mind stayed on that locked door. Dorian slept beyond it right now, vulnerable, alone. She wondered what he looked like in sleep, if he looked peaceful or troubled, if whatever dreams vampires had were gentle or nightmarish. They emerged into the gardens through a conservatory filled with winter-blooming plants. Outside, despite the November cold, flowers grew in profusion. Roses that should not bloom in this season. Lily of the valley, winter jasmine, even delicate orchids in protected alcoves. It is always like this, Mrs. Greaves said. The gardens do not follow normal seasons. They respond to the manor's will, and the manor wills them beautiful. Can I play here? Briar's eyes were wide. During the day, yes, but you must be inside before dark. The gardens change at night. They become less friendly. What does that mean? Rowena asked sharply. It means that what protects also ensnares. Mrs. Greaves's voice dropped. The manor loves Lord Gravesend, absolutely. It will protect his interests above all others, including the well-being of those he cares for. If it believes someone is a threat, or if someone breaks the rules, the gardens become a labyrinth. People have gotten lost. Most eventually find their way out. She paused. Some do not. This is insane. Rowena looked around at the beautiful, terrible gardens. You are describing a house that thinks and feels and punishes. That is impossible. You are married to a vampire. Mrs. Greaves's tone was matter-of-fact. You have signed a contract binding you to this place forever. You will watch your daughter grow old while you remain the same age because his bite will change you eventually, or does, whether you wish it or not. She met Rowena's eyes. The impossible became your reality the moment you walked through those gates. Now you must learn to live with it. The words hit Rowena like a physical blow. Remain the same age. She had not thought about that, had not considered the implications of being bound to an immortal creature. Would she become like him? Undying, unchanging, trapped in this body forever? I did not agree to that. Rowena's voice shook. To becoming like him. You agreed to be his wife in all ways. Mrs. Greaves's expression held something almost like pity. That includes sharing his nature eventually. The transformation does not happen immediately. It takes years of regular feeding, but it will happen, Lady Gravesend. You will become a vampire yourself, and this manor will be your home for centuries. She paused. Unless, of course, you break the contract and face the consequences. I need to sit down. Rowena stumbled toward a bench. There was a bench perfectly positioned in a small alcove as if the gardens had anticipated her need. She sank onto it, her mind reeling. Briar ran up, face flushed from exploring. Mama, look what I found. She held out a perfect white rose. Impossible. Beautiful, exactly like this whole nightmare. Rowena took the flower, its petals soft against her palm, and wondered what she had truly agreed to when she signed that contract. Forever. That was what Mrs. Greaves was saying. Not just a marriage of convenience that might end with age or death or simple dissolution. Forever bound to this place, to Dorian, to a life that was no longer quite human. She looked up at Nightshade Hall looming above them, its stone walls dark against the bright sky. The window seemed to watch her with Dorian's silver eyes, and Rowena understood with perfect, terrible clarity that she had not escaped the cold and hunger. She had simply traded one kind of death for another. This one just took longer. That evening, Rowena sat in her chambers watching the sunset through the window. Each fading ray of light felt like a countdown. Soon Dorian would wake. Soon he would come to her. Soon she would have to confront him about what Mrs. Greaves had revealed. Briar was already asleep in the next room, exhausted from exploring the gardens and library. She had adapted to Nightshade Hall with the remarkable resilience of children accepting the strangeness as if magic were simply another fact of life. Rowena envied that acceptance, even as she dreaded what it might cost her daughter in years to come. The knock came precisely at sunset. 3 measured raps. Dorian did not wait for permission before entering, though he closed the door quietly behind him. He wore another impeccable suit, deep burgundy this time, and his silver eyes found her immediately. You are angry. His voice was calm, observational. I can see it in the set of your shoulders. Angry does not begin to cover what I am feeling. Rowena stood, fists clenched at her sides. You did not tell me. Did not tell you what specifically? There are many things I have not yet explained. That I would become like you. Rowena's voice rose despite her attempt at control. That this binding is permanent. That I signed away not just my freedom, but my humanity. She advanced on him. You let me think this was just a marriage of convenience. A transaction. You did not mention the part where I become a monster. Dorian's expression hardened. I am not a monster, and neither will you be. You are a vampire. You sleep in a coffin. You drink blood. What else would you call that? Survivor. His voice was cold now. I am a survivor of circumstances. I did not choose, playing the hand I was dealt as best I can. The same as you. That is not the same. I had no choice. You had every choice. Dorian moved closer. You could have walked away. You could have refused to sign. You could have taken your chances with winter and starvation. But you chose security over freedom. You chose survival over death. His silver eyes blazed. Do not pretend now that you are a victim when you made a calculated decision. I would have made a different calculation if I had known all the terms. Then let me be clear about the terms now. Dorian's voice was steel. You are my wife. That bond will deepen over time through proximity and through my bite. Eventually, yes, you will begin to change. The process takes years, sometimes decades. You will age more slowly. You will gain strength, heightened senses, resistance to disease and injury. He paused. And yes, eventually you will need to feed as I do. But that transformation is not immediate, and it comes with benefits you cannot yet imagine. Benefits, Rowena laughed bitterly. You call becoming a blood-drinking creature of the night a benefit. I call living for centuries while everyone you love turns to dust a reality you will have to accept. Dorian's voice was hard. I call never being sick, never being weak, never being helpless a gift. His expression was intense. You have been helpless, Rowena. You know what that feels like. Watching your husband die, watching your savings disappear, watching your daughter go hungry. I am offering you power to ensure that never happens again. At the cost of my soul. Souls are overrated. Dorian turned away, moving to the window. I have lived for over 300 years. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched plagues and wars and human cruelty beyond measure. And I have learned that survival is worth more than theological concerns about souls and damnation. He looked back at her. If I am damned, then I am damned in comfort and power rather than in suffering and weakness. You did not choose this life, Rowena said, and her anger was cooling into something more complex. Mrs. Greaves said your family has been here for 500 years. Were you born a vampire? No, Dorian's voice was quiet now. I was made, turned, transformed against my will when I was 32 years old. By whom? Someone who thought they were giving me a gift. His hands clenched on the windowsill. Someone who did not understand that immortality without purpose is torture, that living while everyone you love dies is its own kind of hell. The pain in his voice surprised her. Rowena moved closer, her fury dimming. How long have you been alone, truly alone? Long enough that I forgot what warmth felt like. Long enough that I stopped counting years and started counting centuries. Long enough that I considered walking into the sun more than once just to make it stop. He turned to face her, and the vulnerability in his silver eyes was raw. You think I trapped you here for cruel pleasure. I trapped you here because I am drowning in loneliness. Because I thought perhaps if I could find someone willing to stay, someone who might eventually understand, I could remember what it feels like to be something other than alone. The confession hung between them, honest and painful. Rowena saw him differently now. Not a monster who had ensnared her, but a creature in pain who had found the only solution he could imagine. That does not make it right, her voice was softer now. Trapping me here, changing me without full consent. No, it does not. Dorian's expression was bleak. But it is what I am capable of. I am not a good man, Rowena. I stopped being good when I stopped being human. But I am trying to build something here that resembles life rather than just existence. And I hoped you might help me do that. Something in Rowena's chest loosened. This was not the conversation she had expected, not the confrontation she had prepared for. I will try, she heard herself say. Try to be what you need. Try to make this work. But you have to try too. You have to let me in. Let me see the man beneath the monster. I am not sure there is anything left to see. And then we will find out together. The words felt like a promise, a commitment to something neither of them fully understood yet. But it was a beginning, and sometimes beginnings were all you could hope for. Dorian crossed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms. The embrace was cold but fierce, and Rowena allowed herself to lean into it. She had signed the contract for Briar. But perhaps for herself she could find something more. Something that made forever seem less like a curse and more like a possibility. They spent the rest of that night talking, not as master and servant, not as captor and captive, but as two people trying to understand the strange covenant they had made. Dorian told her about the vampire world that existed in shadows. Not a vast conspiracy, but scattered immortals living solitary lives, avoiding each other more often than not. He explained that most vampires were like him alone, wary counting centuries instead of years. He told her about the changes she would experience as the transformation progressed. Enhanced strength first, though, that would take months. Then heightened senses. The ability to move with unnatural speed. Eventually, perhaps a decade from now, the need for blood would become undeniable. But that was years away. For now, she was still mostly human, mostly. Rowena in turn told him about her life before Thaddeus died. The simple happiness of their marriage. Briar's birth. The joy of ordinary days that she had taken for granted. She told him about the fear after Thaddeus's death, the desperate scramble to survive the nights she had cried silently so Briar would not hear. She told him about the guilt of accepting his offer, the feeling that she had betrayed Thaddeus's memory by marrying a stranger, the worry that she was damaging Briar by bringing her into this strange world. Thaddeus would want you alive, Dorian said quietly. If he loved you, as you say, he would want you and Briar safe, whatever that required. Do you really believe that? I believe love means wanting those you care for to survive, even if survival looks different than you imagined. He touched her hand. You did not betray him, Rowena. You saved your daughter. There is no dishonor in that. The reassurance eased something in her chest. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps choosing life over death was never wrong, no matter how strange the form that life took. As dawn approached, Dorian grew quiet. The sun would rise soon and he would need to return to his chambers. Will you be here tomorrow night? Rowena asked. Yes, and the night after. And the night after that until you grow tired of my presence. I do not think that will happen soon. Good. He kissed her forehead, a gesture that felt almost tender. Sleep well, Lady Gravesend. Try not to overthink everything I have told you. Impossible, but I will try. He left through the connecting door, locking it behind him. Rowena heard his footsteps receding, then silence. She lay in bed watching the sky lighten through the window and thought about forever. It still terrified her, but terror was becoming familiar, and perhaps in time even terror could transform into something else. The days developed a rhythm, mornings with Briar exploring the manor and gardens, afternoons in the library where Rowena read everything she could find about vampire lore, most of which was fiction, evenings preparing for Dorian's arrival, and nights talking, feeding, slowly building something that resembled intimacy. Mrs. Greaves watched it all with her steel gray eyes and said nothing, though Rowena sometimes caught her expression softening slightly when she observed Rowena with Briar, or when Dorian's rare laughter echoed through the corridors. 10 days passed, then 2 weeks. Winter deepened outside, but inside the manor remained warm. Briar thrived. Her laughter echoed through corridors that had been silent too long. She made friends with the cook's cat, learned to play simple melodies on the piano in the music room, and devoured books from the library at an astonishing rate. Rowena found herself smiling more often. The desperate edge of survival faded into something almost like contentment. And Dorian was changing too. The cold distance in his eyes warmed incrementally. He sought Rowena's company even when feeding was not required. He played chess with Briar in the evenings, his ancient patience perfect for teaching a 6-year-old strategy. It was not love. Not yet. But it was something. 3 weeks after their marriage, Rowena woke to find Dorian standing at her window watching snowfall. She had not heard him enter, but she was getting used to his silent movements. You are awake, he said without turning. Too much thinking. She rose and joined him at the window. About what? About how strange this has become. She gestured to the room, the manor, their situation. 3 weeks ago I was starving. Now I live in a palace with a vampire husband and a house that has opinions. The mind struggles to adapt. Yet you seem to be adapting well. Because I do not have a choice. Or because you are discovering that choice and acceptance are not as different as you thought. Dorian glanced at her. You could spend every night fighting this reality. Instead, you are engaging with it. That is a choice. Perhaps, Rowena watched snow swirl beyond the glass. Or perhaps I am just tired of fighting. You are many things, but tired is not one of them. He turned to face her fully. You have more strength than anyone I have known. You challenge me, question me, refuse to simply accept my authority. Do you know how rare that is? Most people who live here either fear me or try to manipulate me. You do neither. What do I do instead? Intrigue me. Make me remember what it was like to want something more than solitude. His hand came up to brush snowmelt from her hair. She had been in the gardens earlier, and small ice crystals still clung to her strands. You make me feel less like a monster and more like a man. That sounds dangerous for both of us. It is. Dorian's voice dropped lower. Because wanting things, caring about things, it creates vulnerability. And I have spent centuries avoiding vulnerability. So why stop now? Because you make it seem worth the risk. He kissed her, and this time it was different. Not the careful, controlled touch of their earlier encounters, but something deeper. Hunger mixed with longing, need mixed with surrender. Rowena responded without thinking, her arms sliding around his neck, her body pressing against his cold one. The kiss deepened. Dorian's hands mapped her curves through the thin nightgown. She felt his fangs graze her lip, felt the sharp thrill of danger that was becoming familiar. He pulled back his eyes, darker than usual. I should go. Why? Because if I stay, I will want more than feeding. I will want all of you. Then stay. The words surprised them both. Rowena met his silver eyes steadily. Stay and want me. I am your wife. This is supposed to be part of our agreement. Is it? Dorian's voice was strained. Or are you offering something more? Because I need to know, Rowena. Is this duty or desire? She considered the question honestly. 3 weeks ago, it would have been duty pure survival. But now both, she admitted. You have been kind to Briar, patient with me, honest when you could have lied. You are not the monster I expected. So maybe this is more than duty. Maybe I am starting to want you too. That admission hung between them, fragile and powerful. Then show me. Dorian lifted her into his arms with inhuman strength. Show me that this is more than obligation. Rowena let him carry her to the bed. Let him lower her onto the sheets. Let herself want this strange cold creature who had saved her daughter's life. And as the night unfolded, as their bodies learned each other with new intention, as pleasure mixed with the sharp sweetness of his bite, Rowena realized something that should have terrified her but somehow did not. She was falling for him, not love yet, but the dangerous territory before love, the place where falling became inevitable. I am in trouble, she thought, as Dorian's mouth found her throat. So much trouble, but for the first time in months, trouble felt like possibility rather than disaster. On the 21st day of her marriage, everything changed. Rowena was in the library with Briar when Mrs. Greaves appeared in the doorway, her face pale. Lady Gravesend, a word, please. The urgency in her voice made Rowena's stomach clench. She followed Mrs. Greaves into the corridor, leaving Briar absorbed in a book about horses. What is it? There is a visitor at the gate, a man named Councilman Ambrose Thorne. He claims to have legal business with Lord Gravesend. Legal business? What kind? Mrs. Greaves's expression was grim. He is contesting the ownership of Nightshade Hall, claims the property is abandoned, that Lord Gravesend has no legitimate heir, that the land should revert to the territory for development. Rowena felt ice in her veins. Can he do that? He is trying, and he has brought a territorial judge with him. Where is Dorian? Asleep. The sun is still up. He cannot wake for another 2 hours. 2 hours. Rowena looked out the window at the afternoon sun still high in the sky. 2 hours before Dorian could defend himself, defend his home, defend them. What can I do? She asked. Mrs. Greaves studied her. You are Lady Gravesend now. You have authority in this house. You could meet with them. Represent your husband until he wakes. I am nobody, a widow from Silverpine who married him 3 weeks ago. You are his wife. That makes you somebody. Mrs. Greaves's steel-gray eyes held hers. And between you and me, you have more spine than the last 3 ladies combined. If anyone can hold them off until Lord Gravesend wakes, it is you. Rowena took a breath. This was her home now, whether she had chosen it freely or not. Briar was safe here. Dorian had kept his word. She would not let some greedy councilman take that away. Show them to the parlor, she said. I will be down in 5 minutes. She changed quickly into one of the more formal dresses from her wardrobe. Dark green velvet that made her look like she belonged in a manor like this. She pinned her hair up, added the silver necklace Dorian had given her 3 nights ago. She studied herself in the mirror. Lady Gravesend, that was who she needed to be now. Councilman Ambrose Thorne was a large man in his 50s with thinning brown hair and the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He wore an expensive suit and carried a leather portfolio. Beside him stood Judge Cornelius Hale, older and more weathered, with shrewd eyes that missed nothing. Gentlemen, Rowena said as she entered the parlor, I am Rowena Gravesend. My husband is currently indisposed, but I understand you have business to discuss. Ambrose's smile widened in a way that made her skin crawl. Lady Gravesend, how convenient. Your marriage is actually part of what we need to discuss. Indeed. Rowena sat in the high-backed chair that Miss Greaves had positioned near the fireplace. She did not invite them to sit. Please explain. It is quite simple. Ambrose opened his portfolio. Nightshade Hall has stood on this land for 500 years, but there is some question about the legitimacy of the current ownership claim. Lord Gravesend has no children, no siblings, no clear heir. The property appears to be, how shall I say, in a state of limbo. My husband owns this land, Rowena said firmly. As his wife, I can assure you the ownership is quite clear. Ah, but that is where things become murky. Ambrose pulled out documents. You married Lord Gravesend only 3 weeks ago. A remarkably short courtship. Some might say suspiciously short. Judge Hale shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Thorne, what exactly are you implying? I am implying that this marriage may be fraudulent. A desperate attempt by Lord Gravesend to establish a family claim when he realized his property rights were in question. Ambrose's eyes glittered. And if the marriage is fraudulent, then Lady Gravesend has no standing here. And Lord Gravesend has no heir. Rowena's hands clenched in her lap, but she kept her voice steady. Our marriage is entirely legitimate. We have a signed contract witnessed and legal. A contract signed under what circumstances, I wonder? Ambrose leaned forward. Did Lord Gravesend offer you something you could not refuse? Money? Perhaps security? Was this truly a marriage of mutual affection, or was it a transaction? Heat rose in Rowena's cheeks, but not from shame. From anger. How dare you question? I dare because the people of this territory deserve to know if their land is being held by legitimate means. Ambrose's voice took on a sanctimonious tone. Nightshade Hall sits on valuable timberland, land that could provide jobs, resources, prosperity for the region. Instead, it molders here under the control of a recluse who contributes nothing to the community. That was a lie, and Rowena knew it. Dorian had told her about the schools he funded, the roads he maintained, the medical supplies he provided to nearby towns. But Ambrose was painting a picture for the judge, and it was working. She could see doubt creeping into Judge Hale's expression. Lord Gravesend has been a generous benefactor to this region for decades, Rowena said. He funds the school in Silver Pine. He maintains the mountain roads. He provides. Provides what? Ambrose interrupted. Mysterious donations from a man no one ever sees, who only appears at night, who has lived here for how long exactly? Longer than should be possible for any normal man. There it was, the real accusation. Ambrose knew what Dorian was, or at least suspected, and he was using that knowledge as a weapon. Judge Hale cleared his throat. Mr. Thorne, I am here to assess property claims, not to engage in speculation about Lord Gravesend's personal habits. Of course, Your Honor. I merely point out that there are irregularities that merit investigation. Ambrose turned back to Rowena. Lady Gravesend, can you produce the original land deed? The document that proves Lord Gravesend's claim to this property? Rowena's mind raced. She had no idea where such a document would be. Dorian had never mentioned it. But if she admitted that Ambrose would use it as evidence of her illegitimacy as lady of the manor. The deed is in my husband's private study, she said, hoping it was true. I will retrieve it. Excellent. We will wait. Rowena stood and left the parlor with as much dignity as she could muster. The moment she was out of sight, she ran. Up the stairs, down the corridor to Dorian's locked wing. She tried the door even though she knew it would not open. It did not. Mrs. Greaves, she called. The housekeeper appeared almost instantly. My lady, I need the original land deed. Ambrose is demanding proof of ownership. Where would Dorian keep it? Mrs. Greaves's face went pale. In his private study, behind the locked door. Can you open it? No one can open that door during the day. Not even me. Not even you. Mrs. Greaves gripped Rowena's arm. If you enter while he sleeps, the manor will respond. It will think you are a threat. Then what do I do? You stall. You hold them off until sunset. 2 more hours. 2 hours. Rowena closed her eyes, thinking. Then she remembered something. The library. 3 stories of books and documents. If Nightshade Hall had stood for 500 years, surely there were records, historical documents, something she could use. The library, she said. Are there archives, old documents about the manor's history? Mrs. Greaves's eyes widened. The 3rd floor. Lord Gravesend keeps historical records there. I do not know if the deed is among them, but there might be something. Rowena ran to the library. Briar looked up from her book, startled. Mama, what is wrong? I need to find something, sweetheart. A very old paper. Can you help me look? Briar nodded, sensing the urgency. Together they climbed to the 3rd floor of the library. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight. Shelves here held not books, but boxes. Document boxes labeled by year. Rowena started pulling them down, searching frantically. 1900, 1875, 1850. She needed older. Much older. Mama, look. Briar held up a box labeled 1824. Property documents. Rowena's hands shook as she opened it. Inside were yellowed papers brittle with age. Land surveys. Tax records. And there at the bottom, a deed. Nightshade Hall and surrounding lands, 12,000 acres granted to Dorian Gravesend, 1824. The signature was Dorian's, unmistakable even after 200 years. The seal was official from the territorial governor. Rowena clutched the document to her chest. This was proof. 200 years of continuous ownership. Ambrose could not contest this. She ran back down to the parlor, Briar following. She burst through the door, breathless. Gentlemen. She laid the deed on the table between them. The original land grant, dated 1824, signed by Territorial Governor William Clark. This land has been Gravesend property for 200 years. Judge Hale leaned forward, studying the document carefully. His weathered fingers traced the signature of the seal. This appears authentic. Ambrose's face went red. That is impossible. No one lives for 200 years. This must be a forgery. Or there must be multiple Dorian Gravesends, and the current one is falsely claiming, "Are you calling my husband a fraud?" Rowena's voice was ice. "I am saying there are questions that need answers. The only question that matters is whether this deed is valid." Judge Hale looked up at Ambrose. "And it appears to be. The seal is genuine. The signature matches territorial records. Whether Lord Gravesend is the original grantee or a descendant with the same name is irrelevant for purposes of ownership." "But the marriage is none of your business," Rowena cut him off. "My marriage to Lord Gravesend is legal and binding. We have a daughter living here. We are a family, and this is our home." She stepped closer to Ambrose, and she saw him actually flinch. "You came here hoping to find us vulnerable, hoping to exploit some legal loophole to seize land that does not belong to you. What is your real interest, councilman? What do you gain from taking Nightshade Hall?" Ambrose's eyes flickered. "Guilt. Calculation. I have no personal interest. I am acting on behalf of the territory." "You are lying." The certainty came from somewhere deep inside, too. Rowena thought about all those years managing her household's meager finances, learning to spot when Thaddeus's employer shorted their pay, recognizing dishonesty in ledgers and faces alike. "You have a financial stake in this. What is it? Timber rights, mining claims. What did someone promise you if you could steal this land?" Judge Hale's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Thorne, is there something you need to disclose?" "Oh, no, of course not. Because if you have a conflict of interest in this matter, that is highly irregular. Your Honor, I assure you." The parlor door opened. Dorian stood there, though the sun had not yet set. His face was pale, paler than usual, and Rowena could see the effort it cost him to be awake during daylight. But he was there. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying absolute authority despite his weakness, "I understand you have questions about my property claim." "Lord Gravesend," Judge Hale stood, "I apologize for the intrusion. Mr. Thorne brought concerns, but your wife has provided documentation that appears to satisfy all legal requirements." Dorian's silver eyes found Rowena's. Something passed between them. Pride, gratitude, partnership. "My wife is quite capable," he said. "Lady Gravesend has proven herself an excellent steward of this estate in the short time she has been here." He turned to Ambrose, and his expression went cold. "As for you, councilman, I am aware of your recent financial difficulties. I am aware that you have been approached by the Silverwood Timber Company about facilitating access to my forests, and I am aware that you owe them a substantial sum in gambling debts." Ambrose went white. "How did you—" "I make it my business to know who threatens what is mine." Dorian stepped into the room, and despite the sunlight weakening him, he still radiated power. "You will leave Nightshade Hall. You will not return. And you will inform Silverwood Timber that these lands are not for sale, not for lease, and not available for exploitation." He paused. "If you persist in this harassment, I will make public every corrupt dealing you have engaged in over the past decade. And believe me, councilman, I have documentation that would see you removed from office and possibly imprisoned." Ambrose grabbed his portfolio and stood. "You cannot threaten me." "That was not a threat. That was a statement of fact." Dorian's voice was soft, deadly. "Now leave my home." Judge Hale cleared his throat. "Lord Gravesend, Lady Gravesend, I apologize for this disturbance. Based on the documentation provided, I see no grounds to question your ownership claim. The matter is closed." He gave Ambrose a disgusted look. "Mr. Thorne, I suggest you reevaluate your priorities." They left. Rowena watched through the window as their carriage rolled down the drive and through the gates. Only when they disappeared from view did she allow herself to collapse into a chair. "You were magnificent," Dorian said quietly. "I was terrified." "Yes, but you did not let that stop you." He knelt beside her chair, taking her hands. His skin was cold even for him, drained by the effort of waking during daylight. "You defended our home. You found the deed. You saw through Ambrose's lies. You did all of that without me. You came anyway, even though it hurt you." "Of course I came. This is our home. You are my wife." His silver eyes held hers. "I heard you tell the judge we are a family. Did you mean that?" Rowena looked at him. At this creature who had offered her survival and was slowly offering her something more. At the man who had woken during painful daylight because he thought she might need him. At the husband who had just publicly praised her capability. "Yes," she said, "I meant it." Dorian pulled her to her feet and into his arms. The embrace was fierce despite his weakness. "You are extraordinary," he whispered against her hair. "I did not expect this when I offered you that contract. I expected compliance, survival. What I got was a partner. Is that so surprising? After 300 years of disappointment, yeah." Rowena pulled back to look at his face. "We should get you back to your chambers. You need to rest." "I need to feed first, to recover." "Then feed." She tilted her head, offering her throat. Dorian's eyes darkened with hunger and something else. Something that looked like wonder. "Here now. We are alone, the door is closed, and you need this." Rowena met his gaze steadily. "Besides, I find I want to give you this. Not because I have to, because I choose to." The bite was sharp for just a moment, then flooded with that familiar euphoria. But this time as Dorian fed, Rowena felt something different through their blood bond. Not just his loneliness fading, but something new emerging. Hope. Trust. The beginning of something that might eventually be called love. When he pulled away, Dorian's color had returned. He licked the wound closed with tender care. "Thank you," he said simply. "We are partners, remember. Partners help each other." "Yes," he smiled, and the expression transformed his face. "We are." As Dorian held her, Rowena felt something change. Not in him, but in the manor itself. The oppressive weight that had pressed against her consciousness since the day she arrived, the sense of being watched, judged, measured, suddenly lifted. The candles in the room flared brighter. A warmth spread through the walls, and for the first time Nightshade Hall felt like it was breathing easily, rather than holding its breath. "Do you feel that?" Rowena whispered. Dorian's eyes widened. "The manor, it is accepting you, truly accepting you, not just tolerating you because I claimed you." He touched her face with wonder. "In 300 years, it has never done this. It has always seen others as threats to be contained. But you defended this place. You called it home. You chose to stay, not because you were trapped, but because you wanted to." The house settled around them with an almost audible sigh of contentment. "I think," Dorian said softly, "the manor has been as lonely as I have. And you just gave it something I never could, a reason to trust again." That night, after Dorian had fully recovered after Briar was asleep, they stood together on the balcony outside Rowena's chambers. The Beartooth Mountains glowed purple in the twilight. Stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "I have been thinking," Rowena said. "About what?" "About what Mrs. Greaves said. About the transformation. About becoming like you." Dorian tensed. "And Ananda, I want to understand it. Not to fear it, but to know what is coming, to prepare." She turned to face him. "If this is going to be my future, I want to choose it with my eyes open. Not have it happen to me, but embrace it. That is a long way from where you were 3 weeks ago." "3 weeks ago, I thought I was trading freedom for survival." Rowena touched his face, feeling the cool skin beneath her palm. "Now I think I am building something. A life, a partnership, maybe even a future I can want, not just endure." "Careful," Dorian said softly. "That sounds dangerously close to happiness." "Would that be so terrible?" "No." He pulled her close. "It would be miraculous." They stood there as darkness fell, two people who had found each other in desperation and were discovering something neither had expected. Not love yet, but the foundation for it. Trust, respect, partnership, choice. And in the house below, the manor itself seemed to settle, as if sensing that its master had finally found what he needed. Not someone to possess, but someone to stand beside. Not a prisoner, but a partner. 6 months later, winter had given way to spring. The North Tower stood empty now. Whatever had lived there, and Rowena suspected it had been the manor's darkest manifestation of possessiveness, a watchful guardian that killed those who fled, had dissipated when the house learned to love without devouring. The door stood open for the first time in centuries, revealing only dust and empty rooms. Mrs. Greaves had wept when she saw it, though she would not explain why. Briar was 7 now, thriving in the village school that Dorian funded. 12 children from Silverpine attended, including 3 whose families Rowena had personally invited. The girl came home each afternoon with stories of her friends, her teachers, her discoveries. She still loved the library at Nightshade Hall, but she also loved the normalcy of school, of being a child among children. Rowena herself had changed. Her skin was slightly paler, her green eyes brighter with hints of silver at the edges. She avoided direct sunlight now. It was uncomfortable, though not yet painful. Her strength had increased. She could lift furniture that would have been impossible before. The transformation was progressing slowly, just as Dorian had promised. She had years yet before the final changes. And Dorian smiled now. Frequently, he hosted monthly dinners for the village leaders. He taught Briar piano and chess and history. He and Rowena spent their nights in conversation and companionship, building a partnership that had become the foundation of something deeper. Judge Hale had mentioned at a town meeting that Lord and Lady Gravesend represent the kind of community partnership we need more of. Even the rumors about Dorian had shifted from fear to respect. Ambrose Thorne had been removed from office 3 months ago, fled to California in disgrace. Marcus Voss, the corrupt mill owner whose negligence had killed Thaddeus and 11 others, was serving 20 years in the territorial prison. Justice Rowena had discovered came in many forms. Mrs. Greaves had received a letter from Paris 4 months ago. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the message was clear. The seventh Lady Gravesend succeeded where I failed. Tell her I am finally free. S. Seraphine, one of the previous wives, a live vampire and finally free of whatever had bound her to the manor all those years. The school Dorian funded had doubled in size. The roads he maintained now connected 3 valleys. The medical supplies he provided had saved lives through the harsh winter. And Rowena had found her own purpose. She managed the estate's charitable works, kept meticulous records of donations, and recipients used the skills she had developed in poverty to ensure resources reached those who needed them most. Now, on a warm May evening, Rowena stood on the balcony with Dorian's arm around her shoulders and Briar safe asleep in the rooms beyond. The Beartooth Mountains glowed orange gold in the sunset. Birds sang in the gardens below where flowers bloomed in profusion. "Do you ever regret it?" Dorian asked quietly. "The choice you made that night in the rain?" Rowena considered the question honestly. "I regret the circumstances that forced the choice. I regret that desperation was the beginning. But the choice itself, no." She turned to look at him. "3 weeks ago, I signed a contract in desperation. Tonight, I stand here in partnership. The cage I feared was becoming a choice I make daily. And perhaps that the power to choose, even within constraints, is the greatest freedom of all." "You are wiser than I was at your age," Dorian said. "It took me centuries to understand that." "You had no partner to learn it with." Rowena smiled. "I have you, and I have you." He kissed her forehead. "My wife, my partner, my—" "Say it," she whispered. "My love." The words came out soft but certain. "Somewhere between the contract and tonight I fell in love with you, Rowena Gravesend. I did not think I was capable of it anymore. But you taught me. Then we taught each other." Rowena's heart swelled. "Because I love you too. Not because I have to. Not because of the contract or the bond or the manor. I love you because of who you are. The man beneath the monster. The partner beside me. The future we are building." They kissed as the stars began to appear, as the manor hummed contentedly around them, as the life they had built together stretched ahead into forever. It was not the life Rowena had imagined when she stood shivering in the rain 6 months ago, but it was becoming a life she could choose with worry rather than resignation. A life built on partnership and trust, and the growing certainty that sometimes the strangest beginnings led to the most beautiful endings. Lady Rowena Gravesend stood in the warm Montana night with a vampire's arm around her shoulders, and her daughter safe asleep in the rooms beyond, and for the first time in a very long time, she felt complete. The future stretched ahead, unknown, but no longer frightening. She would face it with eyes open, with a partner beside her, and with the knowledge that she had chosen this path. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but with courage and with hope and with love. Forever was still a long time. But with Dorian, with Briar, with this house that had learned to love, without devouring, Rowena knew she would more than survive it. She would thrive. And that, in the end, was all that mattered.